Adolf Hitler, aged beyond his years and plagued by the demons of illness and insanity, attends a military conference at Wolf's Lair, a remote field headquarters in East Prussia. The war is going badly, but Hitler, now almost a recluse, still has the support of the German people. In all the German Reich, there are only a few who oppose Hitler. But these men, an odd assortment of civilians and military officers, oppose him intensely enough to want him dead. On July the 20th, 1944, one of them, Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, comes to Hitler's headquarters. His assignment, to kill Adolf Hitler. They call him the Führer, the leader. And he has taken the German nation from weakness and bankruptcy to power and glory. He is Adolf Hitler, Chancellor of Germany since 1933, supreme ruler throughout the Third Reich. His hold on the German people is unprecedented in its scope. Willingly, they surrender their last freedoms to him as he consolidates all power in his own hands.
Wenn die älteren Jahrgänge noch wanken werden könnten, die Jugend ist uns verschrieben und verfallen mit Leiden.
In the long night of the Nazi terror, Hitler's voice is answered only by a rising crescendo of Sieg Heil. Yet amid this flood tide of German approval for Hitler, there still existed a German resistance. This is not immediately evident from viewing the film footage that exists on the Third Reich, for the resistance was not large. It never ignited a response in the German people, and it suffered severe setbacks as its members were murdered or sent to concentration camps. Still, the few brave men and women who fought against Hitler with no hope of public support continued to plot against his government until the last days of the war. Today, through existing newsreel records and recreated documentary film, we shall tell the story of those courageous men and women and of one crucial moment in particular. The conspiracy that led up to the attempt against Hitler's life began as early as 1938, when the momentum of history was plunging the world toward war. A few Germans, civilian and military, hoped to avert that war by overthrowing Hitler's Third Reich. These were not men accustomed to plotting. Much of what they did was inefficient and inept, but they endured, even though, in the end, history outran them. May 1938. Hitler has marched into the Rhineland and has absorbed Austria into the German nation. No one has opposed him. Now, he tells his general staff, he will annex the Sudetenland, the German province of neighboring Czechoslovakia. Warned that the Czechs might oppose him, Hitler says he will wipe Czechoslovakia off the face of the map. The army, which has not protested Hitler's rule of terror in Germany, again becomes a partner in the Führer's plans. One man, however, General Ludwig Beck, chief of the General Staff, refuses to go along. Beck, one of the most respected officers in the German army, feels one must challenge Hitler to prevent certain war. General Beck appeals to all ranking generals of the German army to resign in protest against Hitler's plans. He tells them that they must clean up the Third Reich, put an end to the SS terror, and restore a society ruled by civilized law. Openly at private dinners like this one, and clandestinely, Beck tells them that military obedience ends where conscience and personal responsibility forbid the carrying out of an order. Their duty, he says, if they are not to share in Hitler's guilt for the destruction of Germany, is to resign. If we all act with a united will, he says, then it will be impossible for Hitler to make war. Beck is the only German general to resign. At first a pro-Nazi general, Beck now becomes a civilian leader of a handful of men who will conspire against Hitler's control of Germany. Like all officers of the General Staff, he is well-born and highly educated. Hitler mistrusts him, as he does all intellectuals. He says that Beck is the only man he really fears. At the Nuremberg trials, General Franz Halder testifies.
General Beck was one of the leaders of the plan to arrest Hitler in 1938, to put him on trial in front of a people's court. The German people didn't want the war. Not at that time. They didn't. They would have supported a coup d'etat. I know that. I believe that. I believe that they would have supported our efforts to prevent the war. We had contacted the British and French governments. We told them of our plan to overthrow Hitler. We asked them to stand firm, to face up to the Führer, to make it clear to everyone that this move for Czechoslovakia meant war. But before we could do anything, Chamberlain had come to Munich and gave Hitler Czechoslovakia. Our revolt was done for, because now the German people would follow Hitler anywhere.
They follow him into Poland, into Denmark and Norway, into Holland, Belgium, and France. Victory follows victory. Hitler is at the peak of his success. The conspirators, having been unable to prevent the war, must now conspire to end it. General Beck, confined to his home outside Berlin, tries to enlist the aid of the field marshals in a new move against Hitler's government. But the field marshals are too drunk with military. They refuse to help. Instead, it is a handful of forgotten men, intellectuals, clergymen, diplomats, and lesser army officers who keep the resistance alive. They, with General Beck, are under constant scrutiny of Heinrich Himmler's secret police. They find it difficult to meet, to phone, or even to write to each other. Led by General Beck, these men form a shadow government. Its first task, once a coup d'etat has been achieved, will be to make peace. And now, for the first time, the conspirators decide that to achieve that coup d'etat, they must kill Adolf Hitler. Their target, however, seems impossible to reach. Hitler, who is said to have the instincts of an animal of prey for his own safety, takes no chances. His security is unprecedented in its thoroughness. He wears a bulletproof waistcoat. His hat is lined with 3.5 pounds of steel plating. His vegetarian meals are pre-tasted for poison. And when traveling, he keeps several itineraries and a plane, train, and car at hand, choosing which way to go only at the last minute. No amount of security, however, can keep the conspirators from trying to destroy Hitler. Later, one man who tried tells us,
because we could not carry a gun or any arms when we were near Hitler. We had to devise a way to kill him with a bomb that had a silent fuse, you know, one that didn't hiss when you lit it. The British had such a bomb, a plastic type for sabotage. You could shape it And instead of lighting it, you broke a capsule of corrosive acid, which ate through the fuse and released the firing pin. In March 1943 in Smolensk, we prepared such a bomb, 2 of them, for Hitler. We shaped them into a package so that it looked like 2 bottles of brandy. Hitler was at the front, and we asked one of his traveling companions to take the brandy in Hitler's airplane to give as a gift to a mutual friend. The bombs were timed to explode in half an hour.
Hitler's plane is divided into sealed-off cabins. His own is armor-plated and has parachute capability. The 2 bombs, however, are sufficient to blow the plane completely apart. But the bombs fail to go off. Hitler's life is spared by a chance malfunction of the firing pins. Eight days later, the conspirators try to kill Hitler again. The Führer arrives at the Berlin Armory to make a half-hour visit through an exhibit of Russian war trophies. His guide is Colonel Rudolf von Gersdorf. In Gersdorf's coat pockets are 2 bombs. Their fuses take 20 minutes before exploding. Gersdorf is on a suicide mission. His plan, which includes the sacrifice of his own life, is to stay as close to Hitler as possible, to blow him to pieces. Hitler, however, stays only 8 minutes, not long enough for the fuses on the bomb to exact their deadly toll. But Hitler's luck no longer extends to the battlefield. By 1943, all hope of winning the war is gone. Hitler, however, with his trust in the stars and his belief in his destiny, is determined to fight to the last man. The German soldier continues to support Hitler, and in battle after battle, even in defeat, the German war machine retains a savage capability. But many die, and many more are wounded and maimed. Among the fallen is Count Klaus Philipp Schenk von Stauffenberg, 36 years old. An Allied plane has strafed his car on the North African front. Stauffenberg is to be sent to Germany to recover. There he will join the German resistance movement. He will become one of the new leaders in the plot against Hitler's government. Stauffenberg was brought back to a Munich hospital. Peace made soon. Under the aging and ailing General Beck, the resistance had become disorganized and dispirited. They needed a new and dynamic leader. Stauffenberg's convalescence is long and painful. He has lost his left eye, his right hand, and 2 fingers of his left hand. Shown here with his wife, Nina, and 2 of his children, it's his capability to deal with physical pain. Of another kind of pain, he talks to a friend. Erwin Karlsman remembers.
He was in a deep despair, just lying there in a hospital bed. He just felt he had to do something to help Germany, to stop the stupidity. He had never been happy with Hitler. He had talked about getting rid of Hitler ever since 1936, I think. I remember at the beginning of the war, he told a group of young officers that they shouldn't imitate the old field marshals, you know, who said that they were only acting on orders, that, like the petty bourgeoisie, were just interested in their money and their leave and in doing their job. Perhaps Klaus began to be troubled that he was doing the same thing.
In the months that follow, Stauffenberg, who has already suffered heavily for his country in battle, begins to feel that there is a higher duty to perform for his country. He decides he will kill Hitler and save Germany. Fall, 1943. The war comes to Berlin. There are air raids almost every night. Streets lie in ruins. There are fires everywhere. Very few people are left unmarked by the 5 years of war. But still, the German people remain loyal to Hitler. The sign reads, "Our walls may break, but never our hearts." In October, Klaus von Stauffenberg, still needing additional surgery and in great pain, gets himself appointed Chief of Staff to General Friedrich Olbricht at military headquarters in Berlin. Together, the two officers refine Operation Valkyrie. Approved by Hitler, Valkyrie is a plan calling for the use of the reserve army to set down possible rebellion in the German capital. Valkyrie is under the command of General Fritz Fromm. Fromm, like Hitler, does not know that Operation Valkyrie, a plan to set down rebellion, is itself a plan for rebellion. Calling for troop movements throughout the city, Valkyrie is a perfect cover for a coup d'etat. Once Hitler is dead, it is the plan by which the conspirators hope to seize control of Berlin. Stauffenberg is the chief engineer of the plan. Born to aristocracy and raised in the court of the King of Württemberg, Stauffenberg has been educated to regard his privileges as a responsibility to serve the people. And though trained only to be an army officer, he is obsessed with a political idealism. Self-confident and an extrovert, he is accused of being a show-off, of liking the sound of his own voice, of being a cranky officer who wants to play politics. Yet all agree he is a natural leader. He invests the resistance with a new spirit.
Stauffenberg was intensely serious, like a poet. He was driven like a, how do you say, fanatic, but he was in full control of himself. He spoke to me in November 1943 when I was captain on the Russian front. He asked me to carry a bomb in the pocket of a new uniform I was to model for the Führer, and to embrace him at the moment of explosion, killing him, and myself. I had just witnessed the execution of 1,600 Jews in a little town of Ukraine. I knew Hitler had to be destroyed.
Captain von den Busche never meets Adolf Hitler. The modeling appointment is cancelled when a bombing raid destroys the factory that is to manufacture the uniforms. In early 1944, Hitler's generals desperately try to inform him of the military catastrophe befalling the German nation. Hitler simply shuts them down. His military conferences become mad monologues in which he tries by sheer force of his anger to alter the progress of the war. He refuses to acknowledge the collapse of Italy and the imminence of a Russian offensive on the Eastern Front. His generals warn him of an Allied invasion along the coast of France. But Hitler continues to trust in the stars. The omens tell him that Providence will deliver him and the German people from their current crisis. The conspirators, too, are fighting against time. They know that if they're to save Germany from invasion and almost certain total destruction, they must bring the war to a quick end. They must kill Hitler soon. But as the outside threats to Germany increase, so do the internal threats against the conspirators. Starting in April 1944, nearly 250 Germans a day were arrested for political reasons. Among them were some of the leaders of the resistance. Heinrich Himmler chief of the SS, now knows about the conspiracy. Himmler says he will arrest men like General Beck before they can do any harm. Yet he waits, hoping that their activities will expose others involved in the plot. Some believe that Himmler is prepared to allow the conspirators to kill Hitler, that only afterwards will he arrest them, making himself the new chief of state. Throughout early 1944, all eyes are on a strip of coast along the Atlantic. Here, Hitler has constructed a massive defense system to repel any invasion. He has given command of these defenses to a national war hero, General Erwin Rommel. In the spring, Rommel is finally convinced to join the resistance. And although some conspirators mistrust Rommel as Hitler's general, they view his collaboration as vital. Rommel's position at the head of either the army or the government after the death of Hitler would frustrate the ambitions of Nazis like Himmler. It could prevent the outbreak of civil war. Rommel's decision to join the resistance is explained by his aide.
General Rommel felt it was urgent to make peace on the Western Front. He felt very strongly that the war should end against the West, so that all the troops could be transferred to the Eastern Front to continue the fight there against the Russians. I remember General Rommel would go into an absolute rage. He'd get furious because Hitler ignored his advice. Yet he never thought that Hitler should be killed. He only thought that he should be arrested. He was against killing him because he didn't want to make a martyr out of Hitler.
June the 6th, 1944, D-Day. The Allies invade the continent. Before the day out, American and British. Again, the clock of history has faster than the conspirators. There is some question now whether the Allies would even listen to a new government's overtures for peace. Nevertheless, the conspirators decide to continue with the plot against Hitler. Stauffenberg sees it as a command of honor that must be obeyed. On June the 7th, Hitler convenes a military conference to review the situation on the Western Front. Among those called to the Berchtesgaden meeting are General Fritz Fromm and his new Chief of Staff, Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg. Hitler expects heavy losses on the Western Front. Fromm has been called to discuss possible use of his reserve troops. Stauffenberg's new position and Hitler's growing need for replacements promise to bring the two men together often. This, however, is the first time that Stauffenberg has ever met Hitler. His wife, Nina, tells us of Stauffenberg's reactions.
For the first time, he began to see Hitler's power over people. He saw how he could sway people by charm and fear. But to Klaus, my husband, the whole thing was rotten and degenerate. He told me that, save Speer, they were all psychopaths. And what he saw only made him feel more strongly about what he had to do. He was in great physical pain. And although he knew he was needed in Berlin to run the coup d'etat, only he now had access to Hitler. That's why he made up his mind that he would kill Hitler.
Stauffenberg, who cannot even pull the trigger on a gun, now has to master the breaking of the capsule on the British bomb. He practices with pencils, using a specially designed pair of pliers to snap them in two. He times himself, training like an athlete preparing for the Olympic Games, trying to accomplish in 5 seconds the opening of the briefcase, reaching for the pliers, snapping the capsule, closing the briefcase, all with one three-fingered hand. Stauffenberg has two quick opportunities to kill Hitler. He's called to meetings on July the 11th and July the 15th. Both times he fails to set off the bomb. On the second occasion, Operation Valkyrie, the military part of the coup, is started prematurely. The unusual troop movements are quickly called off and explained away as a surprise military exercise to test alertness. On the 17th, General Rommel is critically wounded and is lost to the plot. Then, on July the 19th, Stauffenberg is ordered to report to Hitler's headquarters at Wolf's Lair the next day. Stauffenberg immediately calls a meeting of the conspirators to make the final plans for a new attempt against Hitler's life. Aware that the Allies are poised on both fronts for final offensives against the Third Reich, the conspirators know that this time there can be no slip-up. Stauffenberg, with his aide, Lieutenant Werner von Haeften, will fly to Wolf's Lair with two bombs in their briefcases. General Albrecht in Berlin, upon receiving word from Wolf's Lair that Hitler is dead, will use Operation Valkyrie to seize control of the capital. Stauffenberg, should he survive, will return to Berlin to assume command. That night, on his way home, Stauffenberg stops to pray at the neighborhood Catholic church. He then goes home to sleep, to wait for his appointment with the man he calls the Antichrist. At Wolf's Lair, Hitler descends deep into the earth to the sanctuary of his underground bunker, where he remains awake until just before daybreak, July the 20th, 1944. At 7 a.m. on July the 20th, Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, with his aide, Lieutenant Haeften, takes off from a Berlin airport for Hitler's headquarters. In their briefcases, they carry two bombs. The flight to Wolf's Lair takes 3 hours. Hitler has only just returned here from Berchtesgaden. He spends much of his time in this remote outpost. The Russian line is only 100 miles away. The compound, an impregnable unit secured by the SS and Army, is built in 3 rings. Past this fence into the outer ring is a 2-mile minefield. Past the third gate to the inner ring, behind a 9-foot electric fence, is Hitler's inner sanctum, his bunker, a conference barracks, and a kennel for his dog. All of it carefully camouflaged against possible enemy air attack. Entrance to this ring is highly restricted. Even Hitler's top generals must secure a daily pass to get through this gate. No weapons are allowed inside. Here, Hitler lives in a world of his own. The 55-year-old Führer is now constantly drugged. A quack doctor feeds him a wide variety of pills and gives him daily injections. Later, in prison, General Jodl remembers.
Die Wolfschanze war eine Mischung aus Kloster und Konzentrationslager. Hier wurde der Führer zum Einsiedler. Er sah niemanden und verbrachte auch seine Zeit mit niemandem. Außer dem Hund Blondie, den er von Bormann bekommen hatte. Er stand diesem Hund näher als irgendeinem menschlichen Wesen. So wie er in dem Bunker lebte, war es sehr ungesund. Keine frische Luft und immer allein. Ich hätte gewünscht, er wäre nach Berlin gegangen, in die Stadt. Die Wolfschanze musste ein sehr deprimierender Ort für ihn gewesen sein.
On the fateful morning of July the 20th, 1944, Hitler, who always sleeps late, is up at 10. He breakfasts alone, reading translated articles from the foreign press, pre-selected for him by Martin Bormann. He then prepares for his daily military conference. At 10:15, Colonel Stauffenberg and his aide arrive at the Wolf's Lair airport, an airport under the constant scrutiny of SS motion picture cameras. Stauffenberg, after instructing his pilot to be ready to take off at any time after 12 noon, then begins the drive to Hitler's headquarters. Wolf's lair and Stauffenberg's appointment with the Führer is a half-hour away. The sun is already very hot. The temperature will go up into the 90s. For Stauffenberg, this means that all the windows of the conference barracks will be open. This will almost certainly lessen the impact of the explosion. He must therefore place the bomb very close to Hitler. At the entrance to the outer ring of Wolf's lair, where all arrivals and departures are visually recorded by the secret police, Stauffenberg is checked and passed. At 11:30, he meets with General Feldgiebel, the chief of communications inside Wolf's lair. Feldgiebel will call General Albrecht in Berlin to report Hitler's death. General Beck, who is to become head of the new provisional government, will then be summoned. Shortly after noon, Hitler proceeds to the conference barracks. He is suddenly asked that the meeting be held early and that it be kept very brief. The deposed Italian dictator, Benito Mussolini, is to arrive at Wolf's lair at 2:30. The Führer wishes to be free to greet him. Stauffenberg is alarmed when General Keitel hurries him off towards the inner ring of Wolf's lair for the meeting with Hitler. Somehow he must start the fuse on the bomb before entering Hitler's conference room. Keitel's aide, Lieutenant von Jon, recalls.
Colonel Stauffenberg stopped and said he had forgotten something and he had to go back inside to get it. General Keitel was very nervous. He didn't want to keep the Führer waiting. But the colonel insisted and went back anyway. We waited for him. It was about 12:25. General Keitel called to him to hurry up. We were late. When he came out, General Keitel instructed me to carry Colonel Stauffenberg's briefcase. I offered to, but the colonel politely refused my offer of help. SS Oberführer Rattenhuber, who sometimes checked inside briefcases, seemed to be in a hurry, and he passed us very quickly through the gate.
As Stauffenberg approaches the conference barracks, he knows that the bomb inside his briefcase will explode in less than 15 minutes. Stauffenberg enters the conference barracks at 12:30. As Stauffenberg enters the room, Hitler is being briefed by General Heusinger. Stauffenberg places his briefcase on the floor under the table, only 6 feet from Hitler. It is 12:37. 11 minutes have elapsed since he started the fuse on the bomb. Quietly, Stauffenberg then slips out of the room. An officer moving closer to Hitler accidentally kicks Stauffenberg's briefcase. He moves the briefcase to the other side of the table's heavy supporting leg. Outside, Stauffenberg hurries to his car. The bomb explodes at 12:42. Hitler survives. Taken from the burning building to his bunker, supported on the arm of General Keitel, Hitler had only minor wounds. Shaken, his only remark was one of concern for a new pair of trousers he was wearing that day. His life had been saved and history substantially altered because of the heavy oak conference table and one man's accidental kicking of Stauffenberg's briefcase. Stauffenberg had placed the briefcase here, on this side of one of the heavy supporting legs, or sokuls, as they're called, the side nearest to Hitler. Colonel Brandt, on moving closer to Hitler, kicked the case and moved it to here, on this side of the sokul, away from Hitler. The explosion killed Colonel Brandt and 3 others and blew some, including Lieutenant von Jorn, clear through windows, but only barely injured Hitler. To Stauffenberg, who witnessed the blast as he was hurrying toward the gate, it was clear that no one could have come out of that building alive.
Minutes later, Stauffenberg and Lieutenant Heften find themselves sealed inside Hitler's headquarters. Security measures following the explosion have closed all exits. But Stauffenberg, taking advantage of the confusion, makes a phone call to the camp commandant and bluffs his way out to freedom. By 1 o'clock, he is on his way back to Berlin in a plane that has no radio. He will be out of communication for the next 3 hours. Stauffenberg is certain that Hitler is dead. He has witnessed the explosion with his own eyes. He is confident that the military takeover of the government is underway. "3:30 p.m., July the 20th, 1944. Klaus Stauffenberg flies back to Berlin. Below him is a dying city that he now believes is free from Hitler's tyranny. Here at military headquarters, nothing has happened. General Albrecht has not given the orders to begin the takeover of the government. He's received only a garbled telephone call from General Feldgiebel at Wolf's Lair. The message leaves him uncertain as to whether Hitler is dead or alive. He wants clarification before proceeding with Operation Valkyrie. He cannot get through to Wolf's Lair because General Feldgiebel, as instructed, has shut down all communications. Hitler's headquarters is isolated from the rest of the world. At Wolf's Lair, the Third Reich is quick to recover. Within an hour, Himmler, Goering, and other top leaders of the government are at Hitler's side. General Feldgiebel is immediately apprehended. Communications are restored. Stauffenberg's absence is discovered, and he quickly falls under suspicion. Stauffenberg lands at the Berlin airport minutes ahead of an order for his arrest. Here, he learns that Operation Valkyrie, the plan for the seizure of the government, is not underway. At military headquarters, they believe that Hitler is alive. They are afraid to issue orders for the coup d'etat. In a phone call to General Albrecht, Stauffenberg is disappointed and angry when he learns of their timidity. An aide to General Albrecht recalls what happened next.
Stauffenberg ordered us to begin Operation Valkyrie immediately, even while he was en route from the airport. General Albrecht tried to get General Fromm to sign the orders. Fromm was the officer in charge, but General Fromm refused. He wanted to be certain Hitler was dead before he'd commit himself to our cause. As a bluff, General Albrecht put in a call to Wolf's Lair. He knew communications were out. He thought that would impress Fromm. But the trick misfired. Communications were already restored. General Keitel answered. He told Fromm that Hitler was alive.
When Stauffenberg arrives at military headquarters, he arrests General Fromm and issues the orders for Operation Valkyrie himself. Only now, 3.5 hours late, are troops dispatched to seal off the government and SS quarters in Berlin. The radio, telephone, and telegraph lines are ordered seized. And all German high commands are notified by proclamation of Hitler's death. The proclamation states that executive control of the government has passed to the army. General Beck, who is now at Stauffenberg's side at military headquarters, is named the new head of a provisional government. At Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia, however,
little is known of the ongoing military putsch. At 4:15, Hitler, showing almost no signs of the explosion, save for a paralyzed right arm, greets Mussolini. Hitler later gives Mussolini a tour of the bombed-out conference barracks. Providence, he says, has again spared him so that he might complete his work. Hitler seems to be in a jovial mood. This mood, however, does not last. SS officer Dollmann, who was accompanying Mussolini, remembers.
Suddenly Hitler began to scream. He went into such a rage, foam came to his lips. He shouted that the German people didn't deserve him. He said that everyone remotely connected with this attempt on his life should be destroyed, wives and children to be sent to concentration camps, no one to be spared. Then everyone in the room, Bormann, Ribbentrop, Goering, they all began to express their loyalty to Hitler, each blaming the other for what had gone wrong with the war. They shook their fists at each other, and Goering, I remember, swung at Ribbentrop with his golden marshal stab. Mussolini left, somewhat embarrassed at the madness he had seen, and he never saw Hitler again.
By 6 p.m., Stauffenberg's proclamation has spurred activity throughout the European commands. The coup seems to be catching a momentum in Vienna and Prague. In Paris alone, the conspirators arrest 1,200 SS officers. In Berlin, Joseph Goebbels, the only member of Hitler's high command in the capital, is under house arrest. Foolishly, the conspirators do not restrict his use of the telephone, and on 2 occasions he speaks to Hitler at Wolf's Lair. Hitler orders Goebbels to broadcast the news of his survival in the bombing. Goebbels is astonished to discover that the radio broadcast center has not been seized. Shortly before 7 p.m., the news of the conspirators' failure to kill Hitler is broadcast all over Europe. It is announced that Hitler himself will soon speak to the people in a special broadcast.
Der Führer lebt.
And now, the generals throughout the Third Reich desperately begin to disengage themselves from the conspiracy. In the next hours, they will try to cover up the evidence of their complicity. Here, at military headquarters in Berlin, as Colonel Stauffenberg and General Beck try to keep the machinery of Operation Valkyrie in motion, a group of young officers is seizing control of the building. At 10:45, the young officers, armed, force declarations of loyalty from their seniors. Those who don't declare for Hitler are arrested. In General Albrecht's office, he, his aide Colonel Merz, Stauffenberg's aide Lieutenant Heften, and General Beck are placed under arrest. Elsewhere in the building, Colonel Stauffenberg is shot. Operation Valkyrie is over. General Fromm is released and takes the initiative in holding an impromptu court-martial. He finds the leaders of the conspiracy guilty of treason. He then orders that Stauffenberg and Albrecht and their aides, Colonel Merz and Lieutenant Heften, along with General Beck, are to be immediately executed by a firing squad. General Beck asks that he be permitted to take his own life. Twice, Beck tries to kill himself, but both times he only wounds himself. General Fromm orders a young officer to help the old man. And so General Beck, leader of the German resistance, dies. A few minutes past midnight, Colonel Stauffenberg, General Albrecht, Lieutenant Heften, and Colonel Merz are taken to the courtyard outside military headquarters. Seconds before the shots are fired, Stauffenberg shouts, "Long live my beloved Germany." At 1 a.m., Adolf Hitler broadcasts to the German people. He reassures them that he is alive. Again, he promises them that Germany's destiny will be fulfilled. Hitler's vow to spare no one connected with the plot against his life is kept. In less than 8 weeks, 7,000 people are arrested. A people's court led by Rudolf Friesler is set up to try the chief conspirators. The trial is a mockery of justice. Hitler orders the proceedings filmed so that he can view them in the evenings. He also wishes to show them to the German people to set an example. The prisoners are brought to Plötzensee prison, where they are hanged by piano wires, strung up like carcasses on butchers' meat hooks. Before the war is over, almost 5,000 Germans will be executed because Hitler thinks they are involved in the plot against his life. Others, like General Erwin Rommel, commit suicide. Hitler, aware of Rommel's limited role in the conspiracy, forces the general to take his own life. Heinrich Himmler is captured after the end of the war. In a British cell, he commits suicide using a cyanide poison pill he conceals in his gums. General Jodl is convicted of war crimes at Nuremberg, and he and General Keitel are sentenced to death. General Fritz Fromm, who executed the leaders of the conspiracy, is himself executed by Hitler. His crime, cowardice. General Heusinger, who was briefing Hitler at the time of the explosion, later becomes West Germany's first military representative at NATO. Fabian von Schlabrandorf is spared execution because the day he is to be sentenced, an Allied bombing raid destroys the court and kills the judge. Stauffenberg's wife, Nina, is imprisoned by Hitler. She gives birth to her 5th child in prison. Adolf Hitler survives July the 20th by only 9 months and 10 days. He commits suicide in his Berlin bunker with his mistress, Eva Braun. Their bodies, with those of the Goebbels family, are cremated. In the 9 months of the war that followed the attempt on Hitler's life, more people died than in the previous 59 months of the war. Germany's destiny was fulfilled, but as the conspirators had feared, not as Hitler promised. German cities like Dresden, Bremen, and Munich were virtually destroyed. And Hitler's name is now publicly preserved only on the Plötzensee Memorial to his victims.
If the plot had succeeded, it is possible that the new provisional government could have negotiated a peace with the Allies, ending the war sooner. The Russians, perhaps, would not have entered Germany. The map of Europe would today be substantially altered. But these are mere speculations. The fact is that these men did not alter the course of history. But in their failure, they became heroic. Against the power and savagery of their own government, men like General Beck and Colonel von Stauffenberg dared treason to reassert the oldest and deepest moral obligations of civilized man. Their loyalty was to a higher human code. And to that code, later reaffirmed at Nuremberg, the men and women of the German resistance not only pledged their lives, but gave them.